Well, hello, and welcome back to Read Becca for a reading vlog. This is my tiny 16-pound, 5-ounce baby, Rue, who's feeling very, very needy, needing some cuddles. So, I misplaced the intro to this vlog. Now that I'm editing it together, I don't have a start. So, we're gonna start it now. So, this vlog is 2 books. One is The Testament of Mary by Colm Tóibín, and the second is The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ by Philip Pullman. Both very well-known authors, but these are kind of underhyped books that I don't really see a ton of people talking about here on BookTube. And they are both biblical rewrites. So that seems like it would be perfect to get done in time for maybe Midrash, the readathon that is all about, focused on interacting with religious related works. Things that give us new perspective on religious works and texts. And I think that's what both of these books do. Very focused on retelling, giving new perspective to biblical stories specifically. So let's dive into the reading. So I've not read Colm Tóibín before, but I shouldn't be surprised that, given the accolades he's gotten, that right off the bat, the writing is so impeccable. So I want to read a couple of lengthy kind of sections here. So this is her going through the experience of having 2 men come to her that want to record her memories of Christ and continually pushing her for more and being unsatisfied with her memories as if they're incomplete or insubstantial. I like that they feed me and pay for my clothes and protect me, and in return I will do for them what I can, but no more than that, just as I cannot breathe the breath of another, or help the heart of someone else to beat, or their bones not to weaken, or their flesh not to shrivel. I cannot say more than I can say, and I know how deeply this disturbs them, and it would make me smile, this earnest need for foolish anecdotes or sharp, simple patterns in the story of what happened to us all, except that I have forgotten how to smile. I have no further need for smiling, just as I had no further need for tears. There was a time when I thought that I had, in fact, no tears left, that I had used up my store of tears, but I am lucky that foolish thoughts like this never linger, are quickly replaced by what is true. There are always tears if you need them enough. It is the body that makes tears. I no longer need tears, and that should be a relief. But I do not seek relief, merely solitude, and some grim satisfaction, which comes from the certainty that I will not say anything that is not true. And then here again, she's again recounting to the men. I told him before he departed that all my life, when I have seen more than 2 men together, I've seen foolishness and I've seen cruelty, but it is foolishness that I have noticed first. He is waiting for me to tell him something else, and he sat opposite me, his patience slowly ebbing away as I refused to return to the subject of his desires, the day our son was lost, and how we found him, and what was said. I cannot say the name. It will not come. Something will break in me if I say the name. So we call him, my son, our son, the one who was here, your friend, the one you are interested in. Maybe before I die, I will say the name, or manage on one of those nights to whisper it, but I do not think so. He gathered around him, I said, a group of misfits, who were only children like himself, or men without fathers, or men who could not look a woman in the eye, men who were seen smiling to themselves, or who had grown old when they were still young. Not one of you was normal, I said, and I watched him push his plate of half-eaten food toward me as though he were a child in a tantrum. Yes, misfits, I said. My son gathered misfits, although he himself, despite everything, was not a misfit. He could have done anything. He could have been quiet even. He had that capacity also. The one that is the rarest. He could have spent time alone with ease. He could look at a woman as though she were his equal, and he was grateful, good-mannered, intelligent. And he used all of it, I said, so he could lead a group of men who trusted him from place to place. I have no time for misfits, I said, but if you put 2 of you together, you will get not only foolishness and the usual cruelty, but you will also get a desperate need for something else. Gather together misfits, I said, pushing the plate back toward him, and you will get anything at all. Fearlessness, ambition, anything, and before it dissolves or it grows, it will lead to what I saw and what I live with now. It is later the same day, because this is a very short book, but I am finished. And I guess let's start with the thing I didn't mention that I should note. about the previous reading. If you noticed while I was showing this text, Colm Tóibín loves a comma. And I too love a comma. So I think if you're reading in print and you don't like that, you may not get along with this as much as I did. But I adored this. This was so freaking good. Yeah, this was amazing. So it's also strange to read because we are getting Mary's perspective. We kind of jump in time. If you're not familiar with the Bible, this story, basically the first half, we get that little bit at the beginning that I read where she's recounting things to people who want to hear her story, more or less, who want to record her memories of Christ. But then she's telling us about her experiences early in his adulthood, gathering a following or becoming of note, really. So we focus in on the experiences surrounding commingled together, these two early experiences of the wedding, where he turned water to wine, and the resurrection of Lazarus. But then we immediately jump to his arrest and crucifixion. So there's a lot of time between that we're not following. And mainly that's because Mary was following her son's career from afar. And she was very, very much an outsider looking in on what was going on with him. Throughout the story, we're hearing her get news of what's going on from other people, from friends and family who have heard what's happening or seen what's happening for themselves. And she has no firsthand account herself to tell about what he was doing because she wasn't there. And so there is this very pervasive sense from her, from the perspective throughout, of being a mother who feels helpless, and reflecting on that from a perspective of motherhood, raising this boy from helplessness into manhood. And that's just such a powerful juxtaposition of two things. And she also, coming from outside, is very frustrated with the situation and just wants to talk some sense into people. So that is very motherly, clearly. And I loved that aspect of it. So there was so much to love about this character, about her practicality and reason, about her interactions after Christ with the people around him who were trying to do something that she didn't know if was really the legacy of her son, you know. And there isn't too much following that. There isn't very much of the grandiose element to this, of the supernatural. This is mainly the story of a mother. And so it's very day-to-day and about simply her relationship and love for her son. So yeah, I love that take. This book, I think, is, and including the afterword, he doesn't specifically say this, but implies it, I would say, that he's kind of disentangling the mother from the saint. And yeah, I like that approach so very much. So I thought this was just so really, really good. I truly can't believe that this was on the Booker Prize nominees for 2013, I think, and I haven't seen anybody talking about it. And it's a very short read. It's very beautiful and meaningful, very thought-provoking. Just wow. Maybe my one critique is actually the cover. So this is a classic painting, so it's not like they requisitioned it for this cover or anything, but this is clearly something you would recognize as Mary if you were just looking at it. But it's also obviously a very Caucasian, very young Mary. It is not the elder Jewish Mary that we're getting in this story. So I do kind of wish we had gotten the real depiction. Yeah. So that was a banger. I am super happy that I randomly picked this up at the library because this was fantastic. I've started The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ, and I already get halfway through it. This is, it seems, another banger. I blazed through it because it is short as well. So there is a lot of white space and very spaced text. So this is going to go very, very quickly. I probably will finish it in one more sitting. I am really enjoying it, though. The writing, so good. I already knew I liked Pullman's writing, but what's so interesting about this is it is really directly following the Bible, but in a narrativized way, if that makes any sense. And it's a compelling narrative. He has, however, changed things to make two separate entities born of Mary, Jesus and Christ, twins at birth. And that's the thing that's changed majorly. And the actual stories and the things happening are directly being pulled from the Bible otherwise. And I'll talk more about that later, I think. But man, oh man, this is really, really good. Really good. Well, hello. I finished The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ. I got on the treadmill for a second go at the gym and blazed through the second half of this. It is so good. This was amazingly good. I don't know why this is so underrated, because Pullman, I know, is kind of controversial with very conservative Christians. Extremely controversial with very conservative Christians. There was a lot of protesting against his Golden Compass books, and I can understand that, but largely that comes from a place of not knowing what those books are actually about. And coming from, as someone who has actually read those books, they're not anti-God at all. Not whatsoever. They are pretty anti-organized religion. And that's the vibe of this, certainly, as well. So I mentioned, I think, in the first clip that Jesus and Christ are separate entities and are kind of twins in this book. And so they're really depicting the duality of the character of Christ, in that Jesus is the kind of radical zealot who has all these amazing ideals and values that overturn everything that the establishment religiously has been doing. And that's very true to the Bible. Like, Jesus was very radical and was quite against what was going on in Jewish religion at the time. And then we have Christ, where Jesus, and to the title, I guess, this is where I should mention the title. So here we have the Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ. But in the book, early on, it's very clearly and directly relayed that Jesus is always this scoundrel, and Christ is always smoothing things over for him. Christ has a certain affinity for rules and wants to grow the kingdom of God. And so he clearly is sort of the avatar of the church in many ways. And he's also recording the things that Jesus is doing. Whereas Jesus, even as a young person, is constantly getting into trouble and disagreeing with the established norms, and very confrontational. So Christ is often stepping in those situations to act as kind of a bridge. And Christ sees all this great stuff in what Jesus is doing and wants to be a vehicle to make it more accessible and proliferate, and just all the good it could do if we could just harness it into a structure and a framework. And so Christ is recording things, but he's not recording them as fact, because that wouldn't be as useful. But he's recording what he calls the truth rather than the history. Because if he gets the core of it, that's what's really important. And very often that means slightly changing things. So I think that's probably the most controversial part of this, maybe, is that you have this idea of the Jesus story having been manipulated from the facts. And I think very conservative readers will not like that. But one of the things I love about this, as well as the Testament of Mary, is just how much they are telling the real story of the fact that when we look at history, we're even, no matter how researched it is, you're not getting everyone's perception. And for both of these, we're getting a very narrative version of biblical stories that gives us a perspective that we haven't had before. And especially with Mary, you see that, you've gotten Jesus's piece of story, but everyone is bringing something of themselves to the experience and to the perception of what's happening. And so Mary's experience in that book was bringing something very, very fresh for me, where it was so like mother-centered and very focused on her experience of her son through all of these amazing things that she's hearing about him doing, but she's not even present for a lot of it. Meanwhile, for this, we also are getting that dynamic with Christ because he's not traveling around with Jesus everywhere. And so he's kind of got people reporting back to him about Jesus's doings around as he's traveling, and is hearing things secondhand and interpreting them based on his understanding of his brother and what he thinks would be true to his brother's actions and how he thinks his brother would talk about things, and then formulating a way to reproduce that into a single cohesive story of what happened. And that's so fascinating to think about, and just makes me think about the long-term influence of the church, because the books of the Bible were combined by the organized church and have been largely controlled and under the power of the church to do with as they will for hundreds of years. And the influence has to be there. We know certain translations of the Bible are more or less influenced significantly by the denomination that translated them. So things like that really were in my thought process as I was reading through this. But a lot of that is kind of more subtext, because if you have read the Bible, like everything in here will be familiar to you as far as the actual plot of the story. It's taking us through those major story beats of the Gospels, of Christ's life and eventual death, and what came after even. So it is very much just telling us the biblical story, and there is a lot that I'm pulling out from that, from my own personal experiences and the commentary that he's making with these two characters. And I just think that is so great that we both have a compelling narrative version of the Bible story, and also he's pulling in a lot more in the subtext. For me, I think the most powerful thing, and I wanted to read the whole entirety of it, there is a chapter of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane as he's preparing for the end of his life, and he's crying out to God in doubt and despair of what's about to happen. And like that whole exchange is just incredible. Like the writing there is so phenomenal. I wanted to read the whole thing, but I'll read just a little bit of it. "And where will you be? Will you look down and strike these blaspheming serpents with a thunderbolt? Will you strike the governors off their thrones and smash their palaces to rubble? To ask the question and wait for the answer is to know that there will be no answer. Lord, if I thought you were listening, I'd pray for this above all, that any church set up in your name should remain poor and powerless and modest, that it should wield no authority except that of love, that it should never cast anyone out, that it should own no property and make no laws, that it should not condemn but only forgive, that it should not be like a palace with marble walls and polished floors and guards standing at the door, but like a tree with its roots deep in the soil, that shelters every kind of bird and beast, and gives blossoms in the spring and shade in the hot sun, and fruit in the season, and in time gives up its good sound wood for the carpenter, but that sheds many thousands of seeds, so that new trees can grow in its place. Does the tree say to the sparrow, 'Get out, you don't belong here'? Does the tree say to the hungry man, 'This fruit is not for you'? Does the tree test the loyalty of the beasts before it allows them into the shade? This is all I can do now, whisper into the silence. How much longer will I even feel like doing that?" So clearly there's an element there of looking back on this story with a modern lens, certainly, but it also, for me, rings true to the Christ of the Bible, who was very, very radical, and the kind of ideals that he upheld that I think confronts the modern day church very well. So I think this is a really fantastic book. It really blew me away. It's really simple and easy to read as well. So I feel like so many more people should read this. And on the back, actually, I hadn't read this before, but all that's on the back is just a quote from Pullman. "The story I tell comes out of the tension within the dual nature of Jesus Christ. But what I do with it is my responsibility alone. Parts of it read like a novel, parts like a history, and parts like a fairy tale. I wanted it to be like that because it is, among other things, a story about how stories become stories." And that's a great encapsulation for this work. As well, this apparently is part of a larger collection called the Myths series, which I am going to need to look up and try to find some more of these, because the series include authors Karen Armstrong, Margaret Atwood, A.S. Byatt, Michelle Faber, David Grossman, Natsuo Kirino, Alexander McCall Smith, who else do I see? Ali Smith, Jeanette Winterson. Those are all authors that I know and love. So I don't know what books they wrote for the Myths series, but I totally need to find them because this was fantastic. Same thing with Testament of Mary. I'm shocked I've never seen it mentioned on BookTube. Come to Bean, big name authors for both of these, and you just don't see them talked about. And that's amazing to me, baffling to me, that these are such incredible works that really made me think. They're very simple and quiet books. They're short and quite readable, but they have so much like density of thought to them. So I think this was a very successful vlog. I think this we're gonna leave it at just the 2 books, I believe. And this is probably a topic I will come back to because there are so many books out there that are fictionalized versions of the Bible that I would love to dive into more. So this was a real journey we went on here. I'm very glad you came along with me on it. As to the list in the back of this book, I will be totally digging in to find out what those other works in the Myths series were. But if you have other books in the same vein, please comment down below and give me ideas, because this is a topic that I'm always open to diving in more to, and always looking for this type of book. So definitely suggest those down below. So I guess with that, I will wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed the vlog. Give me those suggestions down below, and thank you so very much for joining me today.